Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Alok here.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I'm going to kick off things here, maybe give people, I think we are still about, just around 10. So let me things off here. So this is Alok Pant with Unwired, and most of you know me. And the good thing about this webinar is that it's going to be a smaller group of people. So please feel free to interrupt us and ask your questions. So I see already Jim, Dave, Eric. So we'll give people maybe 30 more seconds before we start. So, I guess a couple of things. One, since this is a small group and people who we've been talking to already, please feel free to suggest anything you want to discuss more. I'll discuss the agenda very briefly, and we're happy to take input. This is going to be a very interactive session. It's an intimate session here, and our CTO Srini, who's joining us, will basically be discussing the Unwired digital form solution that we have. This is a no-code solution which enables people to quickly build and design forms and integrate with other systems to automate workflows. So that's the agenda. So I'm going to pause here, and if anybody wants to, just kind of maybe make any opening comments or suggest what you want to see, this is your chance. So I'm going to turn it over. So Srini, I don't know if we can unmute the participants for a minute, or right. So does anybody want to give any input on the webinar agenda today? No. Yeah, go ahead. No, it doesn't seem like that. So Srini, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to you. And if you can, take over the next 20, 25 minutes and leave some time for questions, that will be great. So over to you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Srini. As Alok mentioned, I'm the CTO of Unwired. What I'll be doing today is to try and take you through a couple of slides to basically explain what the Unwired digital forms, the application, and the capabilities are. And I'll then go through a live demo of the Unwired forms applications. And feel free to interrupt me anytime you have any question. And then at the end, we can have a dedicated Q&A. So I hope you guys can all see the screen that I have. Basically, it's just a couple of slides I want to run through. Primarily focusing on the admin portal, the forms builder, and the integrations. Those are the 3 slides that I want to focus on. But just as a quick introduction, the digital forms suite actually consists of multiple artifacts. So the key for the whole solution is the administration portal. The admin portal basically allows you to design forms, be able to set up the connectors to the systems, and there's a forms runtime which you can use if you want to do any custom integrations. I will go through the standard integrations that we offer, which include SAP, S/4HANA, SharePoint, Google Drive, databases, SQL compliant databases, basically. And we also provide some REST APIs that allow you to basically consume the data that is collected in the system. The solution has a companion app, which is what we call the Forms app, which is available on the browser to start, first of all, and then there are dedicated offline applications available for iOS, Android, and Windows tablet, as a universal Windows app is currently under development. So looking first at the application itself, it's cross-platform, so you can use this in any of the supported platforms, primarily iPhone, iPad, and of course Android tablets and phones. The solution also has a continuity feature where you can, for example, fill in part of the data using a browser, and then continue to work on the field with your tablet or your phone, filling out the same form, and then submitting it as and when you have connectivity, and then you could also continue work again in the browser. So the kind of continuity is something we support. And then we also have, as I mentioned before, ability to connect to multiple data sources. You can capture signatures. When we look at data sources, I will also touch upon this when we do the demo. We also have an inbuilt ability to hook up to master data so that while filling the forms, you can pick and choose data sets rather than having to enter all the data. You can capture signatures. The entire forms itself can be custom branded with your logo and all of that. And of course, an inbuilt ability to work offline so that you can work even where you have low or zero connectivity. The entire solution is available both on cloud and on-prem. The solution is the same irrespective of the deployment model. So you get the same secure solution that is deployed on cloud also if required on-prem. The admin portal primarily, if you look at it, focuses on the form builder and the ability to provide the integrations. There are some built-in workflows which we will talk about. But the key is the forms builder, which allows you to basically at a very low, you can call it no code, you can call it low code, provides the ability to design forms, set up some simple rules, and be able to deploy them and then roll them out into production for users to start filling out. And this is what I was mentioning in terms of the forms builder. I'll take you through a live demo so that you can actually see the different elements of the forms builder. So without wasting any further time, unless there are any questions, I will jump into the demo and go through, I think in the next 10 minutes, we will go through the main building blocks of the form solution. And then we'll also try and fill out a couple of forms using the application to kind of give you an idea of the different flavors that are there. So as you can see, you have users, teams, and as they can probably indicate, users basically give you a list of users who can use the application. So it works on what we call an administered model, wherein you give access to users, and then these users can then access the forms using any of the standard applications. So there's no restriction in terms of which device they actually use to access these forms. Any user is allowed to access it on any of the supported devices, right? Users have different roles, primarily 3 roles. Administrator is more of a business admin, not a technical admin. Someone who can go through the system to provision users and teams and also design forms and assign them to the users so that you could achieve a separation, for example, between forms that maybe corporate HR needs and maybe what your field force needs. You could have 2 sets of forms which you then assign to 2 different teams, and users would only see forms that are available for their teams, and the rest of the forms get filtered out. Managers can log into the admin portal. They can view the data being submitted by their team members, so they can actually keep track of progress even if they're not involved in the actual data collection. Because if they are involved in the actual data collection, they can see the same progress using the forms application itself and participate in the collection. But if they're not part of that, they can still look at the admin portal to basically keep track of what's happening, how many forms are getting filled out on time, what's getting delayed, so on and so forth. And then you have normal users who can basically fill out forms. All the 3 roles, admin, manager, and user, can fill forms. There's no restriction. The admin portal is only available to administrators and managers. Okay. So teams, basically a collection unit of team members. So you can have a sales team, you can have a demo team, you can have finance, HR. So you can group them together in whatever form that you think is suitable for your organization. So the primary purpose of a team is to basically set up assignments of forms, which we will see when we go into the form section. But that's the main purpose, where you have users grouped into teams, and teams have access to these actual forms so that they can fill them, right? So let's look at forms. The first point to note here is, of course, that there are categories. So you can, like I said before, split them into HR, finance, or maintenance, plant maintenance, field force, etc., and put the forms together so that it kind of achieves a logical grouping. So if you look at, for example, let's go to maybe sales, and you see a sales order form. There's also, I think, a data sheet that you're looking at within this. So these are basically the building blocks of the solution. So let's go into the sales order form. This form is actually a live form, which is used to create sales orders in SAP, and I'm going to show you that. So what you see within this, the first and most important thing, of course, you see are the list of revisions of these forms. So what do we mean by revisions? So maybe a form is designed and released or published for people to start filling. And the company might want to make further enhancements to the forms, right? So you can go ahead and then do that without disrupting any work, because whatever work you do goes into a draft mode. And once you're happy with the end result, you can then go ahead and then publish the form. But once you publish the form, it doesn't mean that data collection immediately switches to that. So there is the ability to have multiple versions of the form active, which is configurable. So people who have started working with the form already would continue to work with that, complete it. But any new procedures they start to fill these forms would then use the latest. So let's look at what the sales order form looks like. So just hit the design button, and this opens up basically the drag and drop modeler that I was talking about, right? So here's a simple form basically used to create orders in SAP. So you have data that we collect is the bare minimum from a demo standpoint. Take the order type, there's the customer, the delivery date, and then the sales area that the customer belongs to. So in SAP terms, the sales area basically determines the kind of products that are available to sell. And we will look at that as we look into this form. So on the left side, you see the toolbar, which basically allows you to drag and drop components into the modeler. Let's say, for example, you want to add a new text field. Just go ahead, select it, and then drop it wherever you want. And then you get the additional properties that you can set. For example, what's a label you want to display? Is there any placeholder, any tooltip you want to show if you're going to have focus to that? So basically try and help the user to fill out the required data. The data tab basically allows you to set up the default values, whether you want to really persist that at the server or it's kind of a field that you just want to have transient. The format that you want to use. So we basically support input masks. So you can actually set up specific things where maybe you want to collect 3 digits and then another 4 alphabets, or those kind of rules. It's possible to set up with just a mask. Validation basically lets you set up whether the field is required, that's mandatory. Whether it's unique or not is basically decided on the server side. So maybe you want to have, I don't know, a rule where you want to create a single instance of this form per, I don't know, let's say equipment, then you could set up that field as the unique field so that when multiple submissions happen to that, you will get an error to say that, hey, this is already done. There's the minimum length, max length, et cetera, et cetera. So I could go on and on here, but suffice to say that mostly click, select, you should be able to achieve a reasonable amount of validation as far as the data is concerned. But you have specific fields, then you could still go ahead, let me go back, sorry, and then set up what's called as custom validation. So this is basically an ability where you could put in some amount of JavaScript. So you can write some simple JavaScript here, which is validated on the client and on the server, so that you can set up some basic business rules. Alternatively, you could also use a design language, which is what's called JSON logic. It's an open source tool set, which allows you to define rules more as metadata instead of having to write logic in JavaScript. Okay. Now, let me cancel this. I don't want to mess up the form. Let me just take another quick example of the formatting I mentioned. So maybe I add a phone number, for example, right? Let me just add it here. And you can see that it comes with an input mask for a US phone number. So it kind of makes it easier for people to then enter data. So you have standard controls like email, URL. So validation is built in for mails and URLs, for example. You can have datetime fields, day fields. Additionally, there are some interesting components to lay out the form. So you can go with a column model, which is what you see here. So you have a set of fields on the left and a set of fields on the right. You can have as many columns as you want. And the whole system is responsive, so it would work automatically on phone, tablet, and browser on the desktop. You could also use tables if that is of need, where you have to collect a fixed set of rows. Or alternatively, there's what we call the data grid. This allows you to capture multiple sets of rows of data where you don't know really how many rows you need. A table gives you a fixed set of rows, but a data grid allows you to have a variable number, and I'll show you that now. So assuming that you have your form in a state where it's something that you want to check, you can go ahead and then hit the test button. And the form is rendered more or less how it would be seen on the device, right? So you have the basic fields in here. And this was the data grid I was mentioning. So you could go ahead and add, for example, as many fields as you require, because these are variable number of items that you might want to collect into any sales order is not fixed. But it needs to have at least one item. So that rule takes care of it, that you need to have at least an item. So once you're happy with the form, what you can do is to go ahead and then publish it. But I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to show you how it appears here. Hang on. Okay. Okay, let's go back to the sales order. So you see the draft that now opens up here. These are the minor changes that I made, which don't affect the form, but I did save that. So that's one example, quick example of a sales order form. Let me just simply open up the mission data sheet to show you another form, which basically sets up an inspection form where you could have an inspection of a pump or a gearbox or something of that sort, and you're actually collecting data about that. And once data is collected, you can actually have people, putting out a digital signature, right? So that's basically what, to start with, I wanted to do a quick view of what you have in form. What's important is the assignment that I mentioned. So you can actually, let me show this. So you have assignments, right? So for this particular form, we have not set up any workflows, but the workflows consist of three. The first is the shared model where everyone works on the same data. So basically you can have one or more people working on the same form instance at the same time. So if you have a team, which is, for example, collecting some data during an inspection routine, for example, you can have different people filling out different sections of the form at the same time. You could also have what we call an exclusive model where it follows the check-in, check-out procedure where one person starts working with the form, and then once he or she releases, the next one can work with it, and so on. The other one is what's called a review. So many times what happens is if people collect data in the field, it is still required that maybe a team manager or maybe a totally different team needs to review that before the data gets finalized or posted to a system of truth or record, so that you have an in-principle review done before you actually submit this data. Now, this is something you can automate here. Choose that you need a review. You can then pick up a user, for example, or you could actually even select a team, in which case a separate workflow is started. And once the review is done, depending on whether it succeeds or fails, it would actually restart the whole process for the user if the if the review fails, or if it succeeds, then gets posted. Shift handoff is another more advanced workflow, typically used for teams that work in shifts. So maybe your day shift, the entire team works on the data, collects it, and then hands off to the next shift so that they can continue working on the same form. And this can go through multiple cycles again before it's finally completed and submitted, right? So these are automated workflows that can be triggered based on the assignment you set up for particular teams. Schedules allow you to set up, automated, let's say, workflows where maybe periodic form filling is required. You can actually set up a schedule and say that, hey, I want to fill this form. Please do it monthly, maybe the first, Monday of the month, or something of that sort. And you can actually set it up for which team needs to do that, so that these will then automatically get created by the system on the required day and then push to the device or the user so that they can then go ahead and then start filling out these forms. So this is where on a periodic basis, if you want data collection, you can have teams working reactively, but teams can always create ad hoc forms that they want to fill. Lastly, I just want to explain form sets before I jump into the application demo, and then we'll come back to the admin portal. So form sets, as the name suggests, are just a set of forms. So maybe you have an application form for enrollment, and then along with that, you want, I don't know, a bank mandate, maybe some kind of reference letters. So you can have all three or more forms, for example, grouped together into a form set. And this allows you to then perform all the operations that you can do on the form, also on a form set, right? So you can assign the form set to a team so that they can then fill out the data. And the task is deemed to be complete when all the forms that make up the form set are filled out and then submitted, right? So this particular form I'm looking at does not belong to any form set, which is why you don't see anything here. But if I go to the next tab, which is basically a set of forms, says you can create a form set, fill out a title, description, and then you would see the form set in this list. We will briefly look at master data before we jump over to the app demo. So when you're filling, forms, for example, let's take the sales order form. You need to have the customer information pre-filled. You need to have the kind of products that you can sell to them based on the sales area already available. So these are what typically we call as master data. Master data for us is not different from a form. So if you actually look at what the master data here is, there's just a simple example of sales order customer data. You have Apple, Google, Microsoft, 3 customers that have been added. But what's interesting is you also have the design button here. So you tap on that, you see that I have a form which basically designs the sales order customer data. It has a customer ID and a name. So effectively, a new form that we call as a master data form decides what the master data entity is going to be. And it just consists of the customer ID and the name in this case. Because while filling forms, you want a simplified data model. You don't want the complexity of your customer record from your backend system to be actually reflecting into the form. So you can make a flat structure here with just, for example, the ID and the name. And the data for this can be populated into the form system using either REST APIs, or we could also go with a pull mechanism where we can have a custom integration piece deployed on the platform. And this would then populate the data. So once this data is populated, irrespective of whether you log into a browser or the mobile app, the master data is already available for you when you're filling out these forms. And we will see that when we actually fill out the sales order form, right? Reports is something we will see once we submit a couple of forms. So I'm going to switch to the companion application. So what you see basically is a simple dashboard. I have 8 open forms. All of them are due today, and I haven't yet completed anything today. So what I can now do is, let's assume I'm not bothered about the list here. Just go ahead and hit the plus button. You now see all the forms that have been assigned to me. So you see the sales order form, you see the machine data sheet. There was also something called as a weekly pump inspection. So let's look at that. So if you look at this, you have the weekly pump inspection that's also been assigned to me. So let's say I want to fill this out on the fly. So just select it and go ahead and hit fill. An instance of the form is immediately created and then made available for me to start filling it out. So in this sample, you have the date fields already completed as to when you started doing it. So let's say I just go in and put a reference. Yeah, put in a pump number, location. Let's say I just put in some text. Now I can go ahead and then add another one, right? Like I said, this is the variable method. And let's say I don't put in any comments, right? And just go ahead and then do a save. Let's see. Okay, there's also a signature. Let me collect that. Put in my name, and then let's say I go ahead and then save it. So what you see here is an immediate error notification for the user where a particular field has not been filled. So that's highlighted. And you can also see there's a query whether you want to save the partially filled form. So if you want to save it and then continue work, you can just save the partially filled form. But in my case, I want to finish it. So I'm just going to go in and then put in another location. And then I have the ability to also complete it, which means it's going to finalize it. So if there is a review process, it would start it. But in this case, it's just a completion. So let me go ahead and then save this and complete it. So that's the data I submitted. Now let me quickly switch to the admin portal. And let's pick up today. Completed, then search. So this was the search I was mentioning that, we can use to, our managers can use to track data, submissions from users. And there's a configuration which is available also to allow you to edit or keep it read only. I think this is the one I submitted. Yeah, so you can see that the data that was submitted online is already available on the system. And managers and administrators can actually review that. And maybe, for example, they want to make some small corrections, you can also go ahead and then do that. Right. And this is an optional feature. So if you have the flag enabled only, then you will be allowed to make changes, right? So let me open the sales order form. That's where I can show you the, excuse me, the business logic and the master data that we spoke about. So here's the form that we're creating. So it shows me only one type, which is a standard order. Let me choose a delivery date, maybe a couple of days down the line. So you have a list of customers, which is basically available from SAP. So let me choose that. And as you can see, it's lazy loaded. So you can also, type in and then get it filtered. So I can now select the sales area. Now, based on the sales area, the materials or products for me would open up. So if I choose a different customer, different sales area, the kind of materials I can provide change. And that's basically the master data downloaded to the form, plus the linkage to the relation between entities, which is automatically available for you without having to really write any code. So inbuilt linkages can be automatically achieved using the form designer itself, right? Now that the data is collected, let me save this. It's going to take a few seconds because of a round trip to the SAP system, but let's give it that time while we go back and check on the admin side. You will be able to also see the completed data out there, but let me wait to see this because I want to also show you an alerting mechanism that is built into the application so that you can actually see the results of the data that you've collected. So the form really leaves your system. So you see there are two completed forms. I finished an inspection, I finished a sales order. But you also see the alert that the sales order was created, and I have an order number which is from SAP. So the form works two ways, which means there is an online sync. There is data that can be sent out as you collect it, posted to a backend system, and then get it back. Now, this is something where there's a little bit of integration that is done automatically by the platform for the SAP system. But let me also show you a couple of features that allow you to do some quick integrations very easily. One of the simplest ones is what we call a webhook. So you can just set up a URL here, and any URL that you set up here, once a form is finalized, the JSON data gets automatically posted to that the moment the finalization is done. So if you want to trigger a workflow, for example, maybe within your Salesforce system, that once data hits that, you want to update Salesforce or do something else, you could do it by just setting up a simple webhook. Let's say you want to have a PDF of the form created and then email to certain users. You just need to choose that option here, and then go ahead and then you can have multiple mails, comma separated. So you could just put that in, and what this would mean is once the form gets finalized, a PDF version of that would then get mailed to both these users. If you want to achieve, let's say, custom integration because the standard ones are not sufficient for you, maybe you want to update an SAP sales order and at the same time trigger a workflow so that some kind of a work order can be established for production of that item. You could also add a custom handler here. By custom handler, what we mean is the underlying digital platform that powers the application has the ability to execute custom code. So there's also a runtime. So with the webhook concept, the execution of the backend logic is actually moved to the receiving system. But when you set up a handler, you use the Eclipse modeler that we provide, and you can write some minimum Java code. There's a lot of code generation. We support drag and drop modeling for SAP, Salesforce, REST-based systems, SOAP-based systems, if you have a WSDL, for example, or databases. And you can just drag and drop the tables or entities that you want to update, and then deploy that as custom logic that you might want to execute. So that's required if you need to do some advanced workflows, but typically with the webhook and the emailing or the PDF and auto update to systems like a Box or Dropbox, etc., basic integration that you might require to your backend systems is already achievable, but you could also do more fancy, heavy lifting using the platform itself. So those are some simple integrations, forms designing and filling, and the feedback that I wanted to kind of go through today. And we still have a few minutes, so I want to pause here and check if anyone has any questions, or you want me to cover something else. I'm just going to unmute everyone so that if there are any questions, you can go ahead and ask.
So my question would be, once the data's been submitted, how do we get to it and bring it back to our network?
Yeah, so you have multiple options for this, as I explained. If you want to look at it differently, you could say there's a pull model and there's a push model. So if you choose a submit webhook, for example, right? So this URL, you could put in, for example, I don't know, my company and something, receiving or receiver. So what happens is when the form gets fulfilled or finalized, this URL would automatically receive a copy of that data, and then you can then proceed to, handle the update to your backend system from there on. It could also be, for example, a serverless or a Lambda function here. Alternatively, you could have a pull model where we do have a bunch of REST APIs that allow you to access this data. So you could have, for example, a batch job running at your end that can then pull this data on a daily basis or hourly basis and then go ahead and update. That's the push and the pull. The third model is the submit handler I mentioned, where there's a possibility or potential that you could write some code that's Java code and be able to achieve integration with any system of choice so that there's a near real-time update of backend data the moment you receive a finalized form. So different levels of integration based on the simplicity and the ability to actually have an integration touch point into maybe a REST API or something of that sort. So if you just need to get the data, you can use a webhook. If you want to pull the data, you can use the REST APIs, or you can write a heavy handler out here.
Okay. Sounds good.
Due to the paucity of time, I didn't go through the modeler, but that's a separate tool that's available for you to, like I mentioned, do the drag and drop designing and the modeling, and then being able to collect all the data for you to update maybe an SAP. So one of our customers, for example, I'll mail these slides out, or maybe Alok will. It includes a couple of case studies, but one of them is actually an online real-time update of inspections on rigs, etc., of the data that's collected, goes directly into SAP. And it also has the ability to create, for example, notifications when people notice that something is wrong. You can automatically then just fill out the required fields, take a picture, for example, and then create a notification in SAP, then gets assigned to someone to actually have a look at for maintenance, right? And maybe even create a service order. So bunch of customers, they've achieved SAP integration. Some of them have primarily used the webhook to kind of receive a copy of the data and then handle it themselves.
So let me just add a point here. What, as we mentioned, so for everybody who's been on the webinar today, we're offering a free proof of concept. So if you can give us define a use case, a very, maybe a limited scope, we can digitize the form for you or a spreadsheet and actually do some integration to, show the business value and prove the concept. So happy to do that. So again, after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us, share a use case, let's have a conversation, and we're happy to kind of move the conversation along. Does anybody have any more questions?
Yeah, y'all were thinking about being able to show us where you could take a form and drop it into a box and then basically replicate it digitally, a scan form. Is that available?
That is something which is in the roadmap. So right now what we have is the ability to design forms, but we're also looking at working on, for example, converting PDF forms to a digital format by uploading that. So that's something which is work in progress, will come soon.
Okay, any more questions? So I think while questions may be coming in, a couple of points that I would like to kind of leave the audience with. One is that, merely converting a paper form or a spreadsheet to the digital version is not enough, right? You want to integrate with your backend systems, automate workflow. We've done this for several customers, and that is the key. I think that's what we are very good at, is enhancing your business process and moving things at the edge that may be running on Access and spreadsheets and paper forms, getting them, digital, getting data collected centrally, so then you can run reports on it and make better decisions. And as Srini mentioned, we have customers using this on oil rigs, mission critical oil rigs for inspection, safety, terminals to measure, tank levels, things like that. So I think we have a minute here. We'll give the audience one more opportunity to ask any questions. More questions, comments. If not, then we will send you the slide deck for these and a link to the webinar recording, and I'll follow up to see how we can maybe move along a proof of concept for you folks. So with that, thank you, Srini, and thank you everybody for joining in. Appreciate it, and we'll continue the conversation. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.